Hi, everybody. My name is Maria Elena Gutierrez. I am the director of the View Conference here in beautiful Turin, Italy. We are really happy to be hosting this important panel today with some of our industry's brightest minds, the men and women who are reimagining cinema through their daring and bold explorations of the medium. So, let me take a minute to thank the team and to thank our partners for all the hard work that went into bringing this to you. I want to remind everyone about the dates for View Conference 2022. They are from the 16th to the 21st of October. And we hope that we will be able to host many of you in person in Italy next October. The party will be in Turin. The party will be at the View Conference. So, save the date. We'll be delivering a hybrid event, which will be in person and online. And we really want to have some of you there in person. Let me tell the audience to remind the audience to send the questions for our illustrious speakers on the platform, on the chat, where you went to see this. So start at the beginning, send all your questions. Please don't wait until the end. I want to thank the incredible, extraordinary filmmakers who are here with us today for making time in their busy schedule to come and talk about their stunningly beautiful movies. We wish you all the best of luck for the Oscars. We'll be tuning in, we'll be cheering. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn the floor over to our fabulous moderator, AWN's editor-in-chief, Dan Sarto, who will do the honors and who will take it away. So thank you, everybody, for making the time, for being here. We're in for a treat. We're incredibly fortunate. Thank you, and take it away.
Maria Elena, thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Welcome to today's preview discussion panel, 5 Oscar contenders for Best Animated Feature. For the next 2 hours, we're going to dive deep into the minds of the filmmakers behind this year's 5 Oscar-nominated animated films. They're all here. They're all very busy. We're going to take advantage of such a unique gathering to pepper them with all sorts of questions that hopefully they haven't heard 8,000 times over the last few months. I'm sure they've heard them all, but we'll do our best. First off, I want to thank our host, Maria Elena Gutierrez, who's the director of the View Conference, as you know, a singular force of nature and one of the most thoughtful, passionate, and energetic voices in the animation, visual effects, gaming, and transmedia industries. Maria Elena, thank you and the View Conference for hosting this fantastic preview series and inviting me and everyone else to participate. Before we begin the discussion, a bit of administrative housekeeping, like Maria Elena said. Please feel free to share questions. You don't have to wait until the end. Type them in. We'll do our best to get to as many as we can in about the last 30 minutes or so of the discussion. Views coming is a hybrid event in person and online, October 16th to 21st in Turin, Italy. And last but not least, don't miss the 3. Yes, there's 3 more live preview sessions coming up. There's the VFX Oscar Contenders panel. That's on March 9th at 10 a.m. Pacific time. There's the Best Animated Shorts coming up on March 16th at 9:30 a.m. And then there's the best, there's a Turning Red panel with director Domi Shi and key artists, and that's coming up on March 18th at 10 a.m. You can find more information on the View Conference website. This year's selection of Oscar contending animated feature films is a strong group of films as I've ever seen, showcasing a wide range of state-of-the-art visual styles across the 2D, 3D, CG palette, as well as, equally importantly, compelling, well-crafted storytelling that makes such innovative and effective use of the medium of animation to capture the hearts and minds of audiences around the world. We have the directors and producers of each of the 5 nominated films with us today, and we're going to do our best to entice them to share their insights about their films, the paths they took to tell such wonderful stories, the challenges they all faced working in such a time-consuming and demanding medium, and what they hope audiences like you take away after enjoying their celebrated work. Let me take a moment now. I'm going to quickly introduce the films and our speakers, and then we'll get to some questions. From the film Encanto from Disney, we have Byron Howard, Charisse Castro Smith, and Yvett Merino. Welcome.
Hi. Hello, everyone.
Congrats, everybody.
From the film Flea from Neon, participant in Sun Creature Studio, we have Jonas Poher Rasmussen and Charlotte de La Gournerie. Howdy.
Hey, morning, Dan.
Good morning, guys.
From Luca,
thanks for having us.
From Luca, from Pixar, we have Enrico Casarosa and Andrea Warren.
Ciao.
Hi.
From Raya and the Last Dragon, also from Disney, we have Carlos López Estrada. We have Osnat Shurer and Adele Lim.
Hi. Adele couldn't join us today, but the two of us are thrilled to be here.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't. I thought I saw her. My apologies.
It's one of those production moments, Don. Thank you.
It happens. And then from the Mitchells versus the Machine, last but not least, from Sony Pictures Animation and Netflix, we have Mike Rianda, Phil Lord, and Chris Miller.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome, everybody. Congratulations to everybody. Good luck at the Oscars, and thank you for joining us. So let's get started. We have a lot of ground to cover. Let's start with the Encanto team. Byron, I'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about the origins of the film, the inspiration behind the film, and how did the fun of making this film all begin?
Well, usually what happens with these films, they're a 5-year process. I think everyone in this room has spent a lot of time on their individual projects. For Encanto, Jared and I were just finishing up working on Zootopia together. So it was before Zootopia was even done. He was also writing Moana and had this great relationship with Lin-Manuel Miranda that had formed. And the three of us started talking about, it was almost 5.5 years ago, talked about making a movie about family, but not just how families are good, but how they're very, very complicated. A lot of us have large, extended, very tricky families. Some say dysfunctional families. We won't say that about it, but I think we kind of knew there was a real rich bit of storytelling that we could do about a family that was having trouble seeing themselves. The whole movie is really about perspective. And to Lynn's credit, he really leaned in. Like I think we said early on, we wanted to have a dozen characters in this large extended family, which is tough to do with an animated film. But he really embraced this really complex tapestry that would have to be built over those 5 years. And we took research trips to Colombia. Yvette and Charisse Castro Smith joined us. Charisse was huge for us because Charisse brought with her work on amazing shows like The Exorcist and Haunting of Hill House. And this, we read a play of hers called Feathers and Teeth, which was this perfect blend of dark magical realism and family suburban like reality. Is also relatable. So when Charisse joined us and Yvette joined us, we really had a power team that really cared about telling a family story. And I don't know if like Yvette and Charisse, if you want to jump in on any of that, but it was amazing.
You guys want to join in this? Talk a little bit about the inspiration for the film.
Yeah, I mean, so as Byron was saying, it was really born out of conversations. It was born out of talking a lot about our own families, what we loved about our families, what was really extremely challenging about our families. And like I said, we just started out with this idea of perspective and sort of broadening your perspective to see the whole person past what they kind of present as on the surface. And that was really the genesis of the film. And that was like our guiding light throughout, really.
Okay. Let's move on to Flea. Jonas, why don't you tell us a little bit about the origins of your film and the inspiration behind the story you chose to tell?
Yes.
First of all, I think speaking for both Charlotte and me, it's crazy to be a part of this crowd. So thank you for having us. But this story really, started out as a conversation between a friend of mine and me. Amin, who's the subject of the film, I met him when I was 15 and he was 16. I grew up in this very small Danish rural village. And one day he arrived all by himself from Afghanistan. And, we started meeting up at the bus stop every morning, going to high school. And slowly we became very good friends. And of course, already back then, I was curious about how and why he came. But he didn't want to talk about it. And I, of course, respected that. But this story kind of became this black box in our friendship. And it was always there during the more than 20 years, 25 years now that we've been friends, until 9 years ago, where he decided that he wanted to open up and share his story and share it with the world. And that's what you see in the film. You hear his real voice tell his testimony of his journey going from Afghanistan to Denmark. And we then animate the whole thing. So it fundamentally is a story about friendship and a story about someone who's curious about the other person's story, about the other person's secret, and him wanting to share it all of a sudden. So it's really a story about sharing and listening. And of course, it's a refugee story. It's about a physical flight going from Afghanistan to Denmark, but it's also about a man looking for a place in the world where he can be who he is. He's also gay, so it's him searching for a place in the world where he can be who he is with his past and his sexuality and everything else. I don't know, Charlotte, if you have anything to add.
No, I think you speak great about the film. I think so. No, I don't have anything to add on this.
Charlotte, when you came onto the film, what about the origin of that story? What was it that drew you to get involved with the film?
As an animation producer, you don't get the chance often to be presented with a story for an older audience, and that is, I think, very important to be told. So I think it's really that it was such a current topic. We started about 7 years ago. We met 6-7 years ago, and the European immigrant crisis was quite big, and it still is, but it was already that at the time. And I think what touched me in Jonas' story, or Amin's story, is that it's a story about friendship and a refugee, but someone that has been through that. We're talking about a story to a man that made it. And I think back in the day, we talked about being invaded by many refugees, but we didn't talk about what do they become. And this story is really uplifting. It's someone that really managed to do really well. And also it's a story that humanizes, give a face and a depth to what it is to be a refugee. And I thought that using animation is such an honor to propose a craftsman to serve that story. And that's, the team around Jonas, the animation director, Kenneth, and Jess, the art director, and all the other talent that made the animation really has been there to serve that story. And I'm really proud that the craftsman of animation could serve a story like that.
Very well said. Let's move on to Luca, Enrico, and Andrea. Why don't you tell us a little bit about origins of the film and kind of what inspired you to tell the story that we got to see on screen?
Yeah, with pleasure. I really, two things came together for Luca. One was me thinking back about my best friend and I, and how that friendship became a big part of me growing up. And so it made me really think about the friendships we have with people who are very different from us. Somehow we, opposites attract. And would I be even the same person had I not really had this wonderful few years to be dragged into a bit of trouble by a wonderfully extrovert friend? And that came together with this sense of, we always felt a little bit like outsiders. We were socially inept, and we were certainly goofy and maybe a little young for our age. And so this idea of like, what if they're just sea monsters? What if they have this huge secret and they can't tell anybody? Those two ideas came together. It felt like a wonderful metaphor for all the different ways we can feel different and ashamed of something. And of course, then the perfect setting. I've had the luck of growing up on the Italian Riviera, so it became also, of course, an opportunity for a love letter to Italy, and to specifically the Riviera, which is this wonderfully very rocky and very kind of steep terrain right into the sea. Andrea, do you want to add anything?
Sure. I mean, I would just say, coming onto the project, I think the friendship story appealed to me, and I love that aspect. I think it's a thing that Enrico and I definitely share, which is, I think that childlike imagination of like, could there be more to this very normal seeming scene? I think, we both love that idea of like Narnia, where like, it's not just a wardrobe, you can go through the back of it, and there's more to this world than we can see. And I feel like animation especially lends itself so much to that idea, and it's so fun to play with that in animation. So yeah, that was something that was just really fun. And I think we really enjoyed honing in on the themes of the film, digging deeper into friendship, what it really means to root for another person, even when it means that some piece of that is a loss for yourself. So yeah, I think it was fun to really explore all that in one package wrapped up in Italy.
Absolutely. Carlos and Osnat, why don't you tell us a little bit from Raya and the Last Dragon? Where'd the story come from? What inspired you to tell that particular story?
Absolutely. I'm going to kick us off just because I was on the film way earlier, and you wanted to hear about the origin. The truth is, it starts like most of our films with conversation, what's important to us, what's going on, and especially here in the United States, but all over the world in the last 5 years. The divisions were scary, and how polarized we're all becoming, and thinking about as we talked about, what would we want? What would be the one message we wanted to figure out how to think about or to give a point of view on? It was about how you overcome divisions, because the divisions seemed, and sometimes still seem to me, hard to surmount between our points of view. At the same time, we had a beautiful project kind of kicking around the studio that had these 5 amazing lands arranged around the Asian dragon. And the Asian dragon is about fertility and about life and about water. And it's a water deity. It's very peaceful and harmonizing as opposed to our European dragon. And we loved it. The divisions, the parts of the dragon. And we had, and this was, for me, of course, one of the biggest draws, already a couple of amazing, strong, nuanced, flawed, badass female protagonists that were going to carry the story. And we started with research, and as a team spent some time in Southeast Asia. And one of the things that blew us away was how there's all these different cultures. We're talking about 650 million people, multiple cultures, but underlying, there's a sense of togetherness that includes those differences. Even the street food is some of the best in the world because it has all those flavors kind of in together, and the richness of the world. And we came in and just come back and decided to start focusing on, go deeper. Well, what does it take to come together over great barriers? What is it? What does it take to make that first step? And toss it to Carlos to continue that.
I think that was the big question that we were trying to answer, and the one that drew us into the movie from the very, very beginning. Just what would it take for 5 different groups of people with on the surface opposing ideologies, people who on the surface have nothing in common, who don't really want to coexist? Like, what would it take for those people to see eye to eye? What would it take for them to trust each other? What would it take for them to be able to exist again together? And that was a question that felt really important, also just like scarily timely for the times that we were living. And we figured that attempting to answer that question was going to bring us to some really complicated places and open up some complicated conversations that felt necessary. So that's really what the movie is about. I mean, it's obviously seen through the point of view of our protagonist, but it's really about 5 lands who have seemingly nothing in common, and one person with the help of a dragon that helps them come together again, helps them trust each other again, helps them learn how to coexist, and to look past the difference, to understand that if you scratch a little bit beyond the surface, that we really don't have that much that should be separating us. So that was really sort of like the big question that from the very, very beginning, I think, drew us and inspired us, and it just felt like we were contributing something important to a conversation that was really really present in all of our lives, and I think that's really what drew us to make the movie.
Got it. And Mike, Phil, and Chris, Mitchell's versus the Machine. Where did that story come from? I know there was a little bit of a torturous path to finally get that to the screen. How did that film start out? What was the origin of the story, and what inspired you to tell that particular story?
Well, it started with me, not these two jokers. No, I'm kidding. It basically we sort of had this opportunity to pitch something I had this opportunity to pitch something at Sony, and I sort of tried to look at the thing that I love the most, which is my wonderfully dysfunctional family, and it made me think about the time when I was sort of like leaving home for the first time, and like looking in my mom's eyes and she's sobbing, and like realizing that sort of, and sort of like realizing in that moment my sort of like brain growing an extra wrinkle, and sort of like realizing all the things that my parents had done for me. And sort of along the same time, my sort of dad was going on a journey too of sort of like understanding this path of becoming an artist. And also just like the ability to tell a really unique personal story, because Sony sort of didn't have a template for like what kind of movies we make. So I was just like, well, what if it's this? And that was really exciting because it allowed to tell this like really personal story. But nicely, everyone who worked on the movie also has a similar story. So we're all artists, and we're all sort of struggling with our parents. And a lot of people, I think, who watch the movie, maybe might not be artists, but I think everybody struggles to have their parents see them, as they get older and as they sort of become their own person. And then also, I was just really excited because, again, it's like we're sort of in this opportunity where we could make the movie look however we wanted it to sort of use different styles and also use this, because the movie is about a family who's sort of like a dad who's looking into the past and a daughter who's looking to the future. So we tried to do that with the art style of like looking back to sort of what is the most essential about, the 2D animation that we all love, and combining it with like super crazy futuristic technology. And that was like really exciting. And also, since it was a movie about a first-time filmmaker, and we're all first-time filmmakers who are just excited to be there, and was like, oh, there's unlimited possibilities. We were really excited, and luckily we found these like cheerleaders and coaches and everything in between with Chris and Phil, who sort of both protected us from the movie getting the edges sanded off, but also sort of cheerled us to sort of make it even wilder and better.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really struck this year about how personal a lot of these movies are, and we were really drawn to Mike's movie because it was really personal to him, and he wanted to give it so much personality. And for us, animation is a limitless medium, and it's an experimental medium, and Mike and his team wanted to make something that didn't look or feel like anything that had come before. And we were thrilled to join that and help out and kind of hold Mike to his word
we were really excited about his passion, and like he had a manifesto about how he wanted to do things that were never done before in animation, and it reminded us of us when we were making our first movie, and we wanted to just sort of suck his energy so we would stay young forever. But also, I think, we both really related to Katie Mitchell as being, artsy weirdos who wanted to make films, who were,
I'm sure no one else on this Zoom
can relate. Also, I also relate a lot to Rick, because I've got 2 kids that are getting older and they're becoming their own people. And it was really interesting, this idea that you would start with the dad looking back to the past and trying to hang on to something that used to be an old relationship with your kids when they were just sort of extensions of yourself, and not letting go of that, and him sort of coming to look forward and see the person and that they're becoming that is nothing like you, and meeting them there and enjoying them for who they are. And it was a really powerful story that I could really connect to on sort of both sides of the coin. So it was a lot of fun to work on.
I'm going to stay with you guys for the next question. I want to talk a little bit about some of the design decisions and techniques and such that were used on the film. Mike, Phil, and Chris, your film has a unique look among the big studio films. There's some scenes of hand painted. There's this energetic 2D style that represents Katie's own filmmaking style. You really mix it up quite a bit. It's never distracting. It's just it really aids in the storytelling, and it's really interesting to look at. Why don't you talk a little bit about what techniques were used to make the film, and that to make it look so unique?
Sure. One thing that was really exciting was, because thematically it's about this family and all their flaws, we wanted every frame to have those human flaws in it, sort of the broken lines and the brush of a watercolor painting and stuff like that. And it's all like good and well to do and to say, and then someone has to like write the code to do that. So we learned C++. We did it ourselves. No, we had this amazing team who are able to program it so watercolor, so light itself was watercolor textured. And they have this line tool, but then each scene, each lighting artist has to individually go in there and adjust it. And then also just on the other side, there's this sort of like Katie's drawings all over the movie, Katie, the main character. And it really, like, that stuff really came alive when we realized that should be an extension of her emotions, and the whole movie should feel like this extension of this excitable 17-year-old filmmaker who's doing it for the first time and who isn't sort of, the most refined, but she's sort of filled with energy and passion. And when that sort of that style would sort of reflect what she was feeling emotionally, it really made you feel closer to the character. And that was sort of really exciting, because sort of it felt like you made her better, and the drawings felt less like a distancing from the audience and more like it was bringing them closer to the film.
And what I love about it is that it's high and low at the same time, right? It's everything that animation can do. It's super sophisticated, complicated. It takes hundreds of people to make. And then also on top of that, there's just one person drawing or making a puppet, and those things coexisting on screen together is really moving to me. And I think it also does a great job of making the movie feel like it's made by human hands all the time, which I think everybody here has experience using these really, really powerful tools. And they can flatten our humanity, or they can, or they can bring it out. And we kept thinking about these powerful machines that they're no different than a paintbrush or a pencil. They're meant to amplify the human hand. And Mike and his team did an amazing job.
And the great thing about animation is that it really can look like whatever you can imagine. The possibilities are limitless. So when we talked to Mike about how he wanted it to look, he showed us the Instagram page of this woman, Lindsay Olivares, who had been doing character design freelance. And he said, well, I really just want the movie to look like her drawings and paintings. And look at this, where she's, living with her Mexican grandma, and look at all the details and how cluttered it is and how observed it is and how, messy and lumpy it is.
Where can we find a super experienced person who can imitate this style? and then we all were like, well, maybe we should just hire the person whose drawings we love
to be the production designer. So we hired Lindsay to be in charge of making the whole movie look like she painted it herself. And she did an amazing job. And that's sort of the type of thing you can do in animation that is impossible to do in other media. So it was just really hard. We had the whole team that did Spider-Verse and had figured out how to break all the pipeline to make that movie look like a comic book, but then to make this movie look like a totally different thing, we had to re-break it and rebuild it again. But if it's not a challenge, it's not really that interesting.
Right. But not only were those scenes really visually interesting, but they also they introduced us to more of Katie's character in a really innovative way. And so they kind of served both purposes. And we got to know her more just by seeing her work that was presented within the film. So I think that was a really, really effective way of telling the story. Carlos and Osnat, let's talk a little bit about what inspired the look and visual style of your film, from designs to color palette. What led you to make some of the choices that you made for the film?
There's so much of it. Osnat, I think I would love to. I mean, I would say it all started with the research trips that so many of our artists took. And I don't know if you want to speak more specifically about Osnat, and then I'm happy to jump in with our side of things.
Yeah, we were looking at, it's one of those interesting things to find how inspiration and the story we're telling and the world that we're building within the fantastical world come together. Something I think about a lot. It came up on Moana, of course, and of course, beautifully done on Encanto. We thought about it a lot as well. And trying to think of these 5 separate lands, finding the visual inspiration that is the common language, the common visual language of a giant region, a varied region called Southeast Asia, working with our anthropologists and with a lot of people that helped us through this process, but then thinking the way we do in our geeky world building, which is they're up in the mountains. Okay, well, they would have giant bamboo. How would you apply principles from mostly tropical lands here? And so our artists, in addition to the research strips, we did a lot of kind of sociological and psychological thinking and thinking of materials in each land. We go really deep, you guys. It's like, the people of Talon are merchants, so their colors are going to be bright because they're trying to draw attention to themselves. There's so much more world than we get to see. And then we had these brilliant, seriously brilliant production designers led by Paul Felix and Helen Chen. And their point was always, we designed 5 movies. So I hope we get to show some of the rest. But the aesthetic was very much driven by what we wanted to convey, by the world that we wanted to create, by the research that we did, even the research into martial arts and how would a character move who is immersed in martial arts from a very young age, and what would make it comfortable then to move. So we went pretty deep. Carlos?
I think a pretty important component of also just the look of the movie was our cinematography team. Both are in layout and in lighting. From the beginning, there was this real strong desire to want to give the movie a look that fits within the Disney canon of films, but also is just a little bit pushed, and we wanted to really incorporate a lot of live action techniques. So whether it is the way we move the cameras, whether it is some of the atmospherics that we use in lighting the scenes, how we're blocking them. We really wanted to give it this sort of like hyper real look. It's an epic. It's a big scale movie, and we really wanted it to feel like you were there. So that's anything from like the finishing of the characters and the look. There was just this desire to push the boundaries of what a Disney movie could look like, and to like just really try to find some exciting answers. And similarly, we didn't get to experiment quite as much as Mike and team, but we have some sequences where we were very, like the opening sequence of the movie is very much inspired by regional shadow puppets, and we wanted that to have a very different look from the rest of our film that is like much flatter, much like very much inspired in real shadow puppets. They're almost like moving on one plane. The animation had to be very different. The character buildings, I mean, they're really just like two-dimensional puppets. We had some fantasy sequences that were very much trying to emulate a little bit more like the hand-drawn style, and doing it with contemporary techniques. So even within sort of like the set look that we set for the movie, we really tried to also surprise ourselves by incorporating some unexpected techniques. And our team just did such an incredible job in bringing all these visions to life, and it's really humbling to be surrounded by so many people that are just so incredibly good at what they do.
It's true. I just want to add to that to get the scale that we wanted to, we used set extension in a way that we've never done before. Like, we've used set extension before, but a lot of this movie is done by a group of like 5 or 6 insanely talented artists who can do anything, and extended our worlds to give that epic travel feel that I'm eternally grateful to them.
You know, Osnat, we've talked about this in the past. I've spent a lot of time across Asia and Southeast Asia, and you guys did a really wonderful job of capturing both bold and subtle, so much of this, the amalgam of cultures all across that region. And
I think I'm glad you brought that up, because that's definitely key in the identity of the movie. And I think it's not the result of one specific thing that happened. It's a result of so many years of care and thoughtfulness and like love that went into this. And it goes back to the research trips that our artists took. It goes back to the Southeast Asian Story Trust that Osnat put together, which is this group of experts, anything from like architects, anthropologists, dancers, artists who are consulting for us from day one until the movie's released, and then still today. And also just like all the influence that we had from crew members who were from the region, who were also bringing in their very personal experiences. So it's just a result of years and years and years of collaborating with all these people and making sure that the worlds that we were creating felt authentic to the region, also with a fantasy spin, but that all the layers were there. And really, if you dissect the movie, if you look at the fabrics, if you look at the patterns, if you look at the materials, and the wardrobe, like it's millions of decisions that had to be made to make this feel real, and to make our inspiration, our Southeast Asian inspiration, like really, really pop on the screen. And I think just in releasing the movie and hearing all the feedback and hearing all the reactions from so many people in Southeast Asia and the AAPI communities that really see themselves, that really they notice the littlest of details that is just so meaningful to them, in ways, I mean, they've like, Southeast Asia had never been depicted in an animated movie in this way. And I think that that the reaction that we got from the community, I think, was so warm and so welcoming that it was, to me, just like the biggest joy in putting the movie out into the world.
Not to forget to mention, sorry, that both our writers, Adele grew up in Malaysia, comes from Vietnamese origin, even though grew up here. Fawn, our head of story, grew up in Thailand. There were many people at the table constantly in the conversation, kind of infusing it with lived experience. And one would say, hey, my mom would cover the food this way. My mom too. Suddenly it's in Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand. And we all found out one more cool thing, and it makes its way into the movie. And that was really important too, to maintain and sustain it.
Well, as I mentioned, you did a wonderful job capturing such a wide, such a wide variety, such a large, area of the world, and kind of bring that all together in your film. Let's put on our sunglasses and hop on our Vespa and head over to the Italian Riviera. Enrico and Andrea, why don't you tell us a little bit about the design on your film and how and why you made some of the decisions you did?
Yeah, I think there's some kinship for sure with Mike, and because we wanted to do something different, and we wanted to do something expressive and bring the warmth of really handmade artists. So with our amazing production designer Daniela Strigileva, from day one we wanted to really bring this sense of playfulness, capturing a sense of how the world of Italy, it's already itself, when you look at a wall, there's like layers and layers of painting. So we wanted to get a sense of age, but also find an expressive way to show this world. We didn't want to, just take you there with a photo, but take you there with actually something that it's even more expressive. So we looked at all these different ways to bring more of this imperfection, the warmth of what we can do. And I think the computer naturally goes the other way a little bit with actually, we kept on laughing that, like, if there was a gradient that was smooth, that was our enemy. And when is less more was a lot of our questions. Like, we're going to design a beautiful little foam in the wave, as opposed to a realistic shape that would probably be so, made of so many details. We wanted the poem version of a wave as opposed to a realistic waves. And, I think, of course, it's a world of kids. We wanted this playfulness and joy to come through the fact that they were looking at this world from kids, a kid's point of view. Our camera was always low. We joked around, this was our Ozu movie, if some of you might know what I'm talking about. That was really all about putting yourself into these characters. So, Alberto's playful, and so he's going to move a different way. He went from the way we moved and looked for cartoonier ways to represent a movement to the way we designed them. And so we were inspired by 2D. Of course, I'm like most of us, a huge fan of Miyazaki. So we brought some of that inspiration, but also from stop motion, the sense of craft that stop motion brings is something that, again, brings so much warmth. And that, of course, that needs to be mixed with, I grew up on the Riviera, so I was probably a pain in the butt for everybody, because I'd be like, well, that's not actually exactly how that is. Or, I was talking, sometimes even sound design, it'd be like, well, no, actually the beaches here are full of little rocks. We need a sense of a wave that is made of pebbles. We wanted to get those details right. And of course, that was super important, to take you there. And it's a wonderful, wonderful place. And then it was really about finding a way that was actually even expressing this place even more so. And the fish out of water story gives you this opportunity to see it with new eyes, with, wondrous eyes and curious eyes. Andrea, do you want to chime in? And of course, we had to take our teams there as well, because I couldn't be the only one to remind people.
Yeah, I think the teams were very inspired being there. And I think, yeah, Enrico's right. There was sort of this desire to capture almost sort of the postcard version of Italy and how you think of that place. And so that you, as an audience member, kind of get to feel like you fell into a postcard. And we wanted to capture all those details that Enrico's talking about, like the laundry, not just the laundry, but the way the sun shines through the laundry, the way the laundry casts shadows, those elements of that place that make it feel that place that sometimes you don't even notice, but as artists, it's fun. We always joke that we are sort of the oddest tourists that ever walked the streets because, everybody's getting excited taking pictures of a stucco wall, and getting into that minute detail so they can capture all of that. So when we come back, that can be an inspiration for the larger team. So yeah, it's fun to dive into those details. It's kind of fun to put those little details in there, odes to De Sica and other great filmmakers and pieces of Italian culture and history that we get to kind of weave into the background. So it's kind of present, a part of the backdrop. But yeah, we wanted it to feel so that bright, hot summer feeling, that Italian, the place you want to go to, the place you imagine in your mind, like Enrico said, that poetic version, that some of those details are there, but stripped down in a way so that you can really just take them in. So yeah, it was fun to, especially, we all had to work during the pandemic. So we kind of joked that we all got to visit Italy in our computers every day.
That was a good thing to do. And I'll say one last thing. It's like, I always thought like this should pass an old grandma from Genova. And we did get a couple of grandmas that would just check on our reels, because we're like, okay, the pesto needs to be right. Everything needs to kind of feel of the place.
Got to get the pesto right. Enrico, take a minute to tell us about the multi-limb 2D technique that you use to such great effect in a few places in the film.
Yeah, and this is really just a very cartoony method of simulating or conveying a lot of speed, right? And when we thought of a new style of animation, we first realized that actually a fun snappiness inspired by limited animation, actually. We looked a lot at Future Boy Conan, that sometimes is on fours, which means like, very few drawings. So we try and held poses a little more and snap to others. That was one stylistic choice to bring a new vibe. And then we realized that especially with Alberto and especially when things are moving quickly, we could bring this, technique that of course is from cartoony Warner Brothers kind of, Looney Tunes time. And it was actually strangely really hard to do because we have, our virtual puppets are actually hard to kind of just add a limb. And we found weirdly that the rig that we made for the transformation allowed for a second puppet to be there. And so we found a way to make a new tool to just invis part of a second Alberto when you need to put 4 legs instead of 2. And it was just one of those things that really get, there's something about a little lightning in a bottle when you can kind of get a whole animation team excited about looking for something a little different. And of course, on our big downhill, moment when Alberto is running like mad is where you can really see this technique of multi-limb. And yeah, it's really just bringing a playfulness and expressiveness and supported by character.
Right. Jonas and Charlotte, your film, in addition as an animated film, it's been nominated for a number of awards up against live action films as well. Tell us a little bit about your decision, your stylistic decisions, and why you made them, and what inspired you to visualize your film the way you did.
So in the core of the film is really this testimony that I was given by Amin. So a lot of it was really to listen carefully to what he was saying and try to see how can we support this in the best way visually. And so it was really about because it's a real testimony and because we have a lot of archival footage in the film as well, to really bring the authenticity from the archival footage and from the real research we did in what Afghanistan looked like back in the 80s and Moscow in the 90s and so forth, and bring that into the animation as well. So it felt like the archival footage and the animation belonged to the same place. So a lot of it was just to find designs for houses and props in the real world, and just kind of redraw it. Like we saw things in the archival footage, and we would then redraw it and put it into the animation. But then also, because it's also a story about memory and trauma, so you could sense when Amin started to talk about things that's really difficult for him to talk about, his traumas. You could sense in his voice that he would slow down and he would start losing words. Sometimes he would even stop. And I really thought, okay, but we need to see this in the visual style of the film as well. So we invented this more expressive and surreal kind of animation that's monochrome and a lot more graphical than the rest of the film, because all of a sudden it wasn't about what things looked like in that specific situation. Now it was about an emotion he had inside, and we wanted to show that. We wanted to see that emotion. There's a sequence in the film where his sisters is in a container going, they're getting smuggled from Russia to Sweden. And Amin wasn't there, so he wouldn't actually know what it looked like inside that container. But his emotion was there, his emotion of being a 12-year-old boy, being really afraid about what was going on, and kind of visualizing how scary it must have been to be inside that container. And so we wanted to show that instead, his emotion of how he kind of felt it, instead of trying to show what it looked like inside that container. So it's really about, trying to be as supportive as possible to this testimony. And then also, by listening to the testimony, I kind of realized how lonely it has been for him, because he couldn't share the story for so long. And keeping secrets, you keep people at a certain distance all the time because you're afraid of getting exposed. And we wanted to have this loneliness in there. So we really, looked at a lot of references to see how can we get this solitude in the visual style of the film. And we looked a lot at the, paintings, visual artists. Edward Hopper, for example, was a big reference for us for how he treated light and color, just because there's this sense of solitude in his paintings, and that's really something we wanted to have in the film, that you felt the solitude throughout the film. And so we had a bunch of references, both from visual artists like Hopper, Reiki Metzger, Alexander Gransky for the sequences in Moscow. And I also did research trips to both Estonia and Russia. I was also supposed to go to Afghanistan, but my hotel got bombed 2 weeks before, so that got canceled. So we just kind of, instead, we had to, really rely on research, going to libraries, because there's not a lot of material from Afghanistan in the 80s. And then we had a group of local Afghans who would, look at things and make sure that things look right, and felt that a group of Afghans who had lived in Kabul in this area at the time. But really, in the core of everything was, it had to feel authentic, it had to feel organic, and it had to feel subtle, and everything to support this testimony in the core of everything.
Yeah, and I just want to add to Jonas, that's really, we try to have the stylistic choice and also a budget choice, because as you can, we're from Europe and we can't compete with your guys' budget. But so we had to be creative with the animation, which is the most expensive part when you're making a film. So Kenneth Ledclear, the animation director, really tried to be smart, as the Luca team was saying, that to be like snappy when it needs to be snappy, but also really very sensitive and very opposing the characters when it needs to be posed. So I think that's really like we animated on sometime on 8 and from 4 to 8 second frame per second, and so that's really was a really smart choice that we managed to do with the head of department, the art director, and the animation directors, and the production team, Charlotte Sanchez and myself, to like, how can we, within the budgeted constraint that we have, try to find a language that can, artistic language, and also be able to make this movie. So, and yeah, so it was a combination of both, and I'm really happy with the result. I think it's, we realized that you don't need a lot to make the emotion come across. The voice is so strong. So, and I think we really try to, sometimes in animation you can overdo things, with cartoons, that it's like, and here the exercise with the opposites is like, how many frames can we withdraw and without damaging the story, and so I think that was a very interesting process to go through. And it appears that creating within a constraint, a frame constraint, actually can be very helpful for the artist as well. I'm not just saying that because I'm a producer, but so yeah, because we had a limited budget for this. Yeah.
Charlotte, I'm going to stay with you before I ask the question of the Encanto team. One of the questions that came in from the audience is appropriate since you brought up the issue of budget. So real quick, the question came in. Charlotte, I imagine your movie was the most complicated to finance. Can you share a bit about the process? Tell us a bit about how you cobbled together, the financing for this independent film.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it was hard because you need to imagine that it was about 7-8 years ago. So the streaming platform were not as strong as they are now, and animation for adults is coming up, with big franchise like Arcane and so it was even harder to finance animation for adults 7 years ago. And it's not a very sexy pitch to say that you want to make an animated documentary about a gay Afghan refugee. So yeah. Luckily, I've been working. We've been working with Final Cut for Real, which is the documentary company behind Flea, and we've been pitching this project to Annecy Film Festival and also documentary film festival like ITFA. So we've been really trying to go to a different market that we have in Europe to find money. It's really if you look at the financial plans, there's about 40 institutions involved and public finance from Denmark, the Danish Film Institute being a huge part of making this film. We have our French co-producer that has been is about 30% of the financing of the film. So, and when you get financing from country like France, we need to produce and spend that money in France. So luckily the French artists are very talented, especially when it comes to 2D animation. And then we work with Norway and Sweden as well. So it's really took us about 5 to 6 years to finance this film. And but I have to say, it helped us to actually make a better script and also, to digest. And we took about a bit over than a year to do the animatic and the storyboard. That was so pre-production. And that was really helpful to making the movie that we have today. So even though it was really frustrating going to, knocking at every financial door that we could possibly think of, and try to convince people that it was important to make that film. One of the things that I remember we've been hearing was why will you make an animated documentary when with the same budget you could make 4 live action documentary, And yeah, it's not wrong, but at the same time, I believe that using animation, it's also going to reach to wider audience, because if you look at the audience that are watching documentary nowadays, it's people over 50 years old. And I think using animation, it's actually an audience that is from 15 years old that's going to go watch a movie like that. And I think for me, this is really important because this movie needs to be seen to create a discussion, a debate. Like for me, that's if the movie can create that, then I think we've done our job. I've done my job. And so, yeah, it was hard to finance, but I actually think it was good for the process.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, choosing animation definitely opened up the film. I think made it more approachable for a bigger audience, as you say. I want to jump over to Byron, Charisse, and Yvette now. Come back to the. I remember when I saw the film for the first time, one of my first responses was, "This is the deepest, richest, most vibrant animated film I think I've ever seen." It's like it was just every scene, the composition and the artistry in areas I'm not even supposed to be looking at, just across the screen, was just tremendous. Tell us a little bit about, what inspired the look of the film and why you made some of the visual design choices that you did.
Well, maybe I can kick this off with just a few thoughts. And I actually love being in this room and hearing everyone talk about their films, because I think it's just this beautiful thing that we all enjoy as being part of the animation industry, that these are all so well thought out, these stories that are being told, and the designs, like every frame, I think, of all these films is thought about and talked about in such a big way. For us, Mirabel's story was the key. Everything in the film is really designed around her. The fact that even when we pitched it so early on, before we knew her name, before we knew the family's name, we had this early pitch of one ordinary young woman in an extraordinary family. And I think because all of us, myself included, have self-esteem issues and self-worth issues, I think that's why it resonated so much with people. And I think later on, when Charisse joined us, she said something really critical, which was a huge landmark for me in how we told the story. I know Jared feels the same way too. It's like we asked, we're talking to our crew about how we should visualize the film. And Charisse said it should be romantic, not romantic as in romance between two people, but because the film was set in Colombia, because it's inspired by emotional storytelling, everybody on the film was asked to tell their stories, to wrap their own stories into their own designs, whether it was animation, tech anim, cloth design, referencing these beautiful Colombian traditions that we were trusted to represent. So I think that was really key, because of all the films I've worked on over the years, I have never seen a crew rally around a film the way they've done on this one. And that was magic for us, because we would, especially over this last year, as we were seeing the film get completed and seeing all of these beautiful work coming from all these different departments coming together, everyone was giving us 150%. I think that's why, Dan, you were saying, like, you can look at any scene in the film and see incredible detail in the Colombian vegetation, the plants, the beautiful hand-designed tiles that are on the top of every roof, the weave on the different cloth that every character wears, the sort of the color genealogy that was designed by our art directors to tell you who's related to who, even like the variants in the Afro-Colombian hair that everyone had such pride in. I think that's where I was so blown away, and I was so proud to be a part of this, because it's just, I think that's why animation is so great. It's so hard. It takes so long. And it's like, to do this stuff, you have to love it. It's not easy on any level, no matter what format you choose. So that was huge for me. And that's, again, I think everyone here could probably agree. You're so tired as the film gets done. You need things like that to lift you up. And that was a big shot in the arm for me during the last year of production. But Charisse, Yvette, what do you think?
Yeah, I think, first of all, it was based in Colombia, and it's such a beautiful country, and it wasn't something that has always been highlighted in films. And so there was such a beautiful, there was so much beautiful reference or research that we did, that we found. And so we, kind of made sure that we wanted to actually represent that in the film. And what was so inspiring to what Byron was saying is that, like, the crew itself, from, that responsibility didn't land on, just our directors or our art directors or production designers. It really, the crew embraced it and really went on this whole journey. So everyone, all the way, our production management team, our lighters, our tech out, like every, to what you said, Danny, you can see it in the film, as everybody kind of took it personal and made this, really wanted to kind of make this, the best they could do it in their own, and that's what I love about animation. It's such a collaboration, and every single, you just watch it just build and everybody kind of bring in their best work, and it just gets better and better. And so, and of course we had our Colombian Cultural Trust. We had an internal group, our Familia group of internal Disney people. Some were like, they were artists, they were production people, they were HR people, they were legal people. Everyone kind of came in, and they always told us when something didn't look right, they would let us know. They're like, don't do that. And so it was this ongoing process. But the thing that inspired me most is that every single person that touched this film really just wanted to show the beauty of it. So,
well, that they came through in spades. I've got a couple questions that I want to get to before we, in this next segment, before we finish up with a big chunk of audience questions. My next question is kind of it's a general question that can cover any area from the story to the technology behind the making of the films and everything in between. If you and I'm gonna Byron, I'm gonna stay with you and start with you. If you had to peg what would you peg as the most challenging aspects of making this film? And of course, you all made your films in the middle of a pandemic, which is pretty much unprecedented in filmmaking history. So, but what would you say were the biggest challenges for you and the team?
Well, I mean, and Charisse, maybe you can join me on this too, because I think to throw a big compliment to Charisse, when she joined us, she brought this sense of the core of the movie, this idea that Alma, our grandmother, and Mirabel were really the core of the story, and this sense that Alma had this experience that she was not sharing the complete truth about. And that prologue that Charisse wrote it became the anchor for the whole movie. And I think just getting that right. We tried so many different things. We tried that sequence at the beginning of the movie. We tried it at the end of the movie. It eventually became Dos Oruguitas, which is this amazing sort of confession that Lynn wrote, where Alma comes clean about the real details about that exodus and how tough it was. She doesn't sugarcoat it in that version. But I think just the characters and the narrative, and to Charisse and Jared's credit, like there were so many multiple drafts of the script, and they, as writers, they really brought their hearts into it and just like would not stop until it felt emotional and true. So, but good job, Charisse.
Just building off of what Byron was saying, I think, the Abuela Alma, who's one of the central characters in the movie, was a tough character to crack because she is both tough and loving and has this past that is really kind of dictating her family's whole present in ways that are not so healthy, and sort of striking the balance for that character was ended up being like one of the trickiest parts of the movie, right? We needed her to be antagonistic enough that she was a force that they could push against, but that, it just took a long time. And it really, when we cast the actress who plays her, Maria Cecilia Botero, she brought so much to that role and was really able to like walk that line. But I will say the other maybe trickiest part was there's like 12 main characters in this movie, and
it was rough.
Making a story that could contain all of them, could contain all of their story arcs, could contain 12 distinct personalities. I mean, on the writing side, it was challenging. Also on the design and animation side, it was really challenging. So I think just building that ensemble and letting each of those characters have their moment to shine and feel human was also tricky, but a good challenge. So yeah, thanks.
Jonas and Charlotte, what about for you? What was the most challenging aspect? I mean, you've talked about the challenge of financing the film. What else would you say were the most difficult parts of getting this film made?
I think to me, this is my first film at all. I haven't worked in animation before, so to me, just to kind of understand the process of animation and understand the crafts, it took a while. And to kind of build on what Charlotte says, I think even though it was frustrating, it took so long to finance the film, I think it was pretty good that I kind of had the time to really understand. Because, coming from documentary, I was used to that you can change everything till the very end. You can sit in the editing room like 2 weeks prior to release, and you can change everything. But this is a very different process. To just kind of understand that was a challenge. But luckily, we had such an amazing team around me who could really take me by the hand and step me through it. And then I think, to me also, because this is a story about a very dear friend of mine, so the balancing act of always having him being present in it and making sure that he would recognize himself in the film in the end. I think it was so important to me to always bring him with me, you know, in the process, that he would, you know, see edits, he would see designs, and make sure that he felt represented in the film. That was a challenge, but also really, really rewarding. Yeah, Charlotte.
Yeah, I'm not going to talk about the budget because, yeah, it's not interesting. But I think challenging in a good way was the editing of the film, because and the meeting of the team coming from animation and the team coming from documentary. That, you know, it's a different network, it's a different pipeline of working, different software, and that we can find a common ground to discuss for the sake of the film. And I think it was made like it happened in the, you know, very best way. And I think that's because everyone involved in making this film respected Amin's story. So I remember having the storyboard team working together with the editor, Janusz Bieleskov, it's also his first animated documentary, but he has been edited big feature films such as Druk or From Winterberg or The Hunt or Pillar the Conquerant, and really seeing people from doing storyboard, meeting and working with an editor who's used to do live action, and seeing the editor can I have a shot from Kabul from the top, and in live action you will never do that because it's too expensive to reshoot the whole thing. But then Kenneth lead the storyboard, as it was like, yeah, sure. And I think just seeing this chemistry, and that's why I'm so proud that this film is both nominated for documentary and animation, because it means that in each disciplines it is recognized by its pair. And for me it means a lot because every people involved is over 100 people on this. I mean, you know, animation always take a lot of people, but and I think it's for me, animation, it's a medium, and being able to be in different categories, I think it's really light up the medium of what animation can do for story. And so, yeah, challenges, but I think you know become stronger if you have the right team and the right mindset, where people put away their ego to like really tell the story.
Right. Enrico and Andrea, what about for you? What were the most challenging aspects of making your film?
Well, as a first-time director, for sure, you're going through this gauntlet for the first time. So there's so much unknown, and so confidence and a sense that you haven't done it before is for sure. You know, that in our case, we even put in the movie, it's the Bruno in your head, which I guess we should. I've been asked many times. They're separate Brunos, right? Byron, you can back me up on this. Not the same Bruno. I think the challenge here was like, you know, I made a short in La Luna that was lyrical, and the challenge here, can I put some of that vibe into a feature? So that wanted to be a slightly different tone, a slightly different pace. So I think that was the hardest thing, finding the right mix of fantasy and lyricism, and when to slow down a little bit the movie. And can we make a movie where the stakes are kid-like and of the kid world, and still get everybody on board? Those were, I think, was really the hardest part. And of course, you're tackling them really in story and in storyboarding and writing, and finding really the confidence to lead. And so that's really finding your own voice. As it was definitely, I was saying like the Alberto that helped me through my childhood was really our amazing crew turned into Alberto. And we had to jump off some pretty high cliffs to make this movie. And so that was really the journey for me. But
Andrea, you want to add anything?
Yeah, no, I mean, I just think always it's story, you know, cracking the story, pushing the story, and from Enrico's perspective, finding his voice in that and making sure that we're preserving those important threads that were a part of that original inspiration. It's easy to lose. It's a long journey. We all know this, and it's easy to lose that along the way. So I think it requires a tremendous amount on the part of everybody, and certainly the director, to hold steady that little center, that precious thing about each story that you have to protect along the way as things are pushing and changing. I mean, obviously we had the pandemic and everybody had that too. So it's weird thing to mention or not mention, but that was a huge part of it for us because we had to go into lockdown right as we started shot production. And so, every shot that was made had to be made from home. And I think, it was really a challenge of trying to foster that incredible and important sense of creative collaboration that we all so value about the process. It's part of what makes it such a joy, is how every single person can contribute that bit of themselves, that insight, that story, that history, and make it unique. And I think pulling that together over Zoom in our houses, knowing how people were doing, that part was hard. It was a loss, really. It was hard to know that and to feel that. But I think that I just will say a million times over and over and over how absolutely incredible our crew was at giving and loving the film and giving so much of themselves, even when they were in such a difficult circumstance. So I just can't compliment them enough.
Well said. Osnat and Carlos, what about for you? What were the most challenging aspects of producing your film?
I mean, same, Andrea. The pandemic, I think, would be up there, and I think that's the one thing that all of our films have in common. I think the one single hardest challenge for us in putting the movie together was the ending, and that was because, as I mentioned earlier, sort of like the big question that we're attempting to answer is like, how can people with very different ideologies, very different perspectives and worldviews, how can they align and trust each other and work together? And eventually the ending came up, and we had to answer that question, and it went through so many different versions that just didn't feel earned. And it wasn't until we clicked and something clicked and we unlocked this idea of, we're saying that trust is sort of like the one ingredient that we need in order for people to really reach out, to reach across, and to let someone into your own world. And trying to figure out a way to materialize that, I think, became really challenging. And then somewhere in the development process, we came up with the idea of giving the last piece of the puzzle to the antagonist, to Namari, who up until that point had been sort of like the last person that you would ever trust with the fate of the world. And we had to make so many pieces work in order for that moment to feel earned. Raya, our protagonist, has been struggling with trust issues from the very beginning of the movie, from her childhood. She goes her entire adulthood having a really, really hard time letting people in, having a really, really hard time trusting. And throughout her journey, she meets the rest of the characters who bring her, one step closer. The dragon's a very, Cecil the dragon's a very important mentor throughout her journey, but ultimately she comes to this final decision that she has to make, and she realizes that unless she leads by example, unless she trusts, no one really is going to follow the lead. And her way of trusting is putting all responsibility, sharing responsibility with the antagonist of the movie, the person least likely to be trusted by our protagonist. And that just felt like something that we had never seen before in an animated movie. Like, I think it surprised us when we were thinking about it, just taking that main choice away from the main character. It still is her choice to give it to Namari, but ultimately the fate of the movie was in our antagonist's hands. And I think when all of those things clicked, I think the movie just became so beautiful, so meaningful, and it made sense, because we hadn't really found a way to really answer that question that we posed for ourselves at the beginning and giving the end of the movie to Namari, I think just it made this feel really, really special, and it sort of like made us question what it would take for us to be able to trust someone who has like complete opposing worldview from us, and how can we find that middle ground in which we would be able to extend our hand and let someone in. So I think it offered a really beautiful, deep exploration in each of us, and I think that knowing that we were leading up to that, it just forced like such incredible conversations amongst our team, and I think people watching it too, where all of a sudden throughout the movie you started to see the point of view of the antagonist, and you're thinking, oh, she's not really a villain in the same sense that, you know, so many animated movies, so many Disney movies have sort of like pinned the bad person right from the beginning. It's so clear, and you introduce this antagonist, but you start scratching at the surface, and you learn that she has so many layers to her, and that all of her actions are actually motivated in her taking care of her people, and her wanting to survive, and her wanting her people and the people that she cares about the most to thrive. So yeah, anyway, it's a, you say the ending, but it was really every decision leading to the ending, and making sure that every single thing that we were doing throughout the storytelling process was supporting that ending. It was earning us that ending. So I would say that was at least, you know, for me and Don, the thing that really kept us up at night every single day. And when it felt like we cracked it, it just felt so rewarding. I don't know for you, Osnat. All sorts of
Oh, I can list the difficult things for sure, and it's hard not to talk about the pandemic in this context. We were 2 shots animated in, and but I think that for us it got very, very specific, because when we were trying to understand, to really crack what is the force that is outside of us all that we need to get together in order to overcome for the greater good. At first we thought, were they sentient? Did they have a leader? What later became the Druin? And we started thinking about them, and this is way before the pandemic, as like a virus, like something that comes and thrives no matter who you are, what you think you know. And this became the whole process became a little bit, you know, life imitating art, art imitating life, because then also at the same time we were forced to trust each other in ways that we never had before. We're not in the room together. We're not seeing much of what each other are doing. We're coming in to see on the big screen at the theater things we've only seen on an iPad this big, and we're trusting that our insanely talented crew has actually carried out the movie that's in the heads of the directors and hopefully on the page. And that completely blew us away. I think that, and for me personally, I'm deeply interested in collaboration across cultures. I grew up all over the world. It's just something that's always been dear to my heart. And to find a way to dig in with the right people, with the right partners, into what are principles we can embrace from within such a great and varied set of cultures, part of the world I love very much, and then how to infuse that into what is essentially a fantasy story. This, unlike Flea, which, by the way, beautiful movie, you guys, is not a documentary. And it's a fantasy world, and, you know, and the dragon manifests and can help us save the world. And yet, how do you find that truth within that is such, I wouldn't call it the hardest thing because I love it so much. Maybe when you love something, it doesn't seem hard, but it is such a great thing to dig into and understand. If you can just sit in respect and then find the right people to play with. We were lucky. Our main consultant is a cultural visual anthropologist, Southeast Asian, with an expertise of all over Southeast Asia. So how much luckier can a producer get? My writer, Kui Wen, was also a martial arts choreographer in Southeast Asian martial arts. Again, the world kind of finding its way to create something that feels real unto itself, done with respect to what inspired it, and yet completely its own thing. So I think those 2 things.
Got it. Mike, Phil, and Chris, what about for you? What were the most challenging aspects of making your film?
At least,
one of the things,
at least for me, I sort of really understand what Enrico is saying. Sort of my first time out. So just I would say the crushing fear was the main thing that was following me at all times. But especially because even though this was a first time movie, we were also taking these big risks that many people said not to do. They were like, don't make it look normal. And we're like, no, we want to do this other thing. And it was, even though that was really scary, we leaned on, and this is the crew, we leaned on our awesome crew to sort of like help carry us, whether it's like, the art style or Katie being LGBTQ+, which Flea also did amazingly, that the nightclub scene. Ugh. But there's just so many collaborators that helped us, and they made taking these risks seem fun and exciting and not scary. They were able to calm me, especially Chris and Phil.
Well, I mean, one of the things is you have to unlearn the way you did the last movies, right? And interrogate every choice and go, we're doing this because like this is the way we've seen it be done, and that goes from like every movement, right? Is this like something I saw Felix the cat do, or is this something that we observed our characters would do? And creating a culture, as Mike did, of where it was safe to try something new, where all of these wonderful veterans who've made a bunch of movies got together with a bunch of people who were doing it for the first time and became a kind of garage band that was breaking the mold and breaking the pipes. And yes, this is really inconvenient for this computer program that's been designed for these other movies to do, but we're going to figure out a way to break it. And then I'd also add, just to keep it spontaneous, I think everybody here understands that you're making the move over again, and to maintain that joy of like, oh, let's just throw this thing in there at the last second. It helped the movie feel like it was made by Katie Mitchell, but it was made by somebody doing it for the first time.
And you want to have that nuance, right? That's really hard to get, whether it's, the Rick and Katie story, where we would work on the story, and one time you'd watch it and be like, boy, Katie's being a real brat here, and why can't you just like see that her dad's like trying to reach out to her? And then we would overcorrect the other way and be like, boy, Rick is the jerk here, and why can't he just understand who Katie is? And finding the balance to let you tell a story where you can empathize with both sides. Same thing with the technology theme about like, you don't want to make a movie that's just sort of saying phone bad, get off your phones, kids. Technology is a really, it's a part of our lives and it's not going anywhere. And it's a tool that we can use for great things. Like this very group of us right now, we're using the internet to have this thing, and it's great. It's bringing people together if it's used correctly, and trying to do that in a nuanced, balanced way. And then trying to use the tools to make a movie that feels like a painting come to life. That was really, really hard. So much harder than you would think it was. And I think about the hardest thing besides the story to me was getting hair to look hand painted, because you could, you wanted it to look like the way you would paint it, which would be like a wash and then some highlights on it. We didn't want it to look like you see every single individual hair. The computer's great at making really realistic hair now. It's fantastic. But for the style of this thing, we wanted it to look painted. But if you didn't make it move like real hair, it looked like a weird helmet that Katie was wearing. And so it had to be made up of a million hairs, but then look like it was just a painting that was one solid mass. And things like that seem like they should be easy, but they took 6 months to figure out and get right. And that it was that way from the story and the look, and every aspect of the movie was like, it should be easier to do this, but as we all know in this medium, nothing is easy.
Very much so. There's a question that I want to get to, and it's interesting because a large number of the questions that have been coming in deal with parts of this question in various ways towards various films. So I'm kind of pushing this all together, and I'm going to put it to some of you guys. And the question has to do with inclusion, which is being spoken about a great deal this season with regards to feature animation. In the Mitchells versus the Machines, we have, as you've mentioned, Katie Mitchell, who's the first LGBTQ+ protagonist. In Flea, Flea focuses on the ordeal of a gay Muslim man in Afghanistan and his harrowing escape to Denmark through Russia. And in Encanto, we have Mirabel's buff and tough sister, Louisa, who I read in Out Magazine is described as a lesbian icon of strength. I'm going to start with Mike, you Phil, and Chris. Was it challenging to get this done in your film? Was there any backlash to dealing with inclusion to such a degree? And how do you think audiences have responded to it?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, with the whole movie, we're trying to be observational, and we had a lot of LGBTQ+ team members on the team, and they were like, Katie seems gay. She's gay, right? And we had based her on some, friends of ours that went to art school that were, and we were like, well, I don't, are we allowed to do that? And then they're like, yes, of course you're allowed to do that. Go, run, sprint, because one of our team members was like, if I saw a character that looked like this when I was little, maybe I would have felt less alone. And I started crying because, that was so powerful. And so dear God, why not? And I think it's really, and I do think it's something that we all should be striving for. And it's something that it's really nice to see from all of these movies where they're trying to tell new stories and trying to sort of push the boundaries of what has been done before. Yeah.
And I think we tried to do it as simply and plainly as possible. Because Katie draws on her shoes and her hair is red and she likes girls, and it's very simple, and it's not the problem in the movie. It's not why she's having a challenging relationship with her dad. We didn't want that to be the problem. We wanted to show that this is this is what families look like, and they embrace who she is. I think that the thing that I find really moving about this whole moment is, and all of these films, is I think often people think of the punitive case about inclusion, that people don't want to get in trouble. And I think too seldom people make the affirmative case of how much better the movies get and how much better the world gets and how much more fun it is to make the film. And I think that everybody here is makes that case really beautiful.
Right. When there was obviously some nervousness, but I have to give a lot of credit to Sony for not being chicken. But they were like, there's obviously this fear that there's going to be the backlash, as Phil said. But the case that we brought forward was, I think for every one person, you could have 10 people who are more excited to see the film and are more likely to go see it. And I think that was low. In reality, there was basically zero
audience like anxiety about it, even though there may have been a little bit of marketing anxiety.
Right. It was really, it meant a lot to a lot of people, and it's been really rewarding to have parents come up to us and people saying like, oh, my daughter saw this and it meant so much to her, and all these people who felt really seen by Katie as a character, and it really it meant so much to so many people that it felt like it was such a no-brainer, and the world still spins and everything is fine, so people should be less scared.
Those are, it's great to hear you say those are some types of the reactions you got. It's unfortunate, in a certain sense, it's unfortunate that this has to be kind of an issue to talk about. But it is an issue to talk about, and it's an important one. Jonas and Charlotte, what about with your film? Charlotte, you mentioned, the difficulty of going to folks and saying we're going to do an animated film about a gay Afghan man's exodus from Afghanistan to Denmark. Did you guys face any backlash in making the film and in the response to the film?
No, and I want to say, you know, a lot of people is asking, but how is Amin reacting to all the highlights on this film? You know, we never expected it, and the reason why we use animation is to protect his identity. And one thing he said, and Jonas should probably say better than me, but it's like he's very happy because he never watched a movie where he could see someone like him on screen, you know. And I think we have, a duty as working in entertainment to represent people, and it's not just about genre and sexual attraction, you know. It's also sizes, color, you know. I think it's you know, now we're talking about the LGBTQ plus, and that's great, you know. But I think it should be more global, and I think where I like when I watched the movie that are nominees, you know, also using the style, you know, 2D, 3D, stop motion. And I think animation for that is one of the amazing tools, because you can use so many techniques, you know, and I think we can play with that. That's what animation can be for. And if we can use animation to show that, you know, it's okay, everyone is okay, and there's a place for everybody. And I think we filmmakers need to do that, because yeah, I don't know, like, I mean, who else we're going to do it? I think there's other people, but I think this is one of our responsibility, I think.
Right. Byron, Charisse, and Yvette, what about for you?
Well, I'll jump in there. I mean, just to totally agree with the other teams, and Charlotte, I really relate to what you're saying, because I think specifically animation has such a wide reach across the world. I think it's because it's so relatable, also because we have a lot of different age groups looking at us. I think it's so important that we recognize that up until this point, we really have not represented our audiences on screen like we should, and everyone is looking for a way to see themselves in these movies. I've felt that over the years as a gay man growing up. My husband and I watched Flea this morning together, and we loved it. And you know, and talking about mixed families and the beautiful, diverse ethnicity of Colombian families, and even our teams that came together to make our film specifically for Encanto, everyone had to give so much of themselves because it's important to get that on screen. But I know Yvette and Charisse, what do you think?
Yeah, I think, you know, it's such an important conversation to have. And I love that, you know, everyone here has, you know, and Charlotte, to your point, it includes diversity and inclusion, and it doesn't, you know, everybody wants to hang it on, you know, one element, whether it's, you know, ethnic diversity, LGBTQ representation, but really it's diversity of there's so much more, and there's so many different stories. And one of the things that, you know, has been, you know, humbling just in the reaction of the film is how many people are seeing themselves in all the different characters within Encanto. Is you know, people are seeing themselves in the personality and the pressures of Luisa and Isabela, or in Mirabel, just trying to figure out where you fit in this family that you're in. I know I have felt that many times. And really, you know, having, I know for me personally, I didn't have animated films when I was growing up that looked anything like the family that I have. And I have cousins, you know, that's what I love about the design of the characters in Encanto, is that they're so diverse within that. I have cousins who have red hair and blue eyes, and no one questions whether they're, you know, Mexican American or not, because they just are. And so I just think it's such an important thing. And I love that this is where, you know, the films this year are, you know, really pushing and going in that way. And yes, I feel like we all have that responsibility to continue these storytellings. There's so many different stories that we can tell out there.
Enrico, I want to drag you into this. One of the questions came in, said that as a queer person, I appreciate Luca so much because it is possible to read it as a same-sex romance. I'm curious if the filmmakers deliberately left space for this possible interpretation.
Yeah, it's been so wonderful to see the response of that took it in that direction. I wrote it and I came from a place of, us being friends, and but I knew from day one this was a story about, first of all, feeling like underdogs, and what are the different ways where someone can feel like an outsider, an underdog, right? Underdogs forever. And this idea of not fully bringing your full self to the world because you're ashamed, or you're afraid, or you're disenfranchised. So I experienced it as an immigrant coming to the US, for example. It was a little hard for me to even want to bring my Italianness. I wanted to fit in. We knew as we wrote it that Luca and Alberto have this big secret. And so it was the perfect metaphor for any way that someone can feel different. Julia comes in this other way that she feels odd and quirky. So we love the idea that it could represent race, immigration, that it could be an LGBTQ metaphor. I think a great story allows you as a viewer to really project yourself in it. So I was, to a certain degree, surprised, but then we're like, well, we knew that everybody would bring their own feeling of difference. So I'm so touched by that sense of reading into it, and very much the movie was built to kind of, for someone to really come out and really show himself. The sea monsterness is a wonderful way to represent any way someone can feel like an outsider or ashamed of what he has inside, and so showing your full self. So it's been a wonderful surprise, and I feel like we probably all feel the same about this. Like, you put the movie becomes the world; it's not yours anymore. So this is a wonderful moment where you can see the amount of fan art, the amount of it's just lovely to see how much it's been embraced, even especially by the LGBTQ community. So I'm very proud and very happy about that. When we wrote it, we had this as a prism of differences, the many different ways.
Right.
Yeah, and I think just the thing I would add to that quickly is just that I think this is where some of the themes that are in our film, I think they're in a lot of the other films as well. And I think the mission we're all trying to do, and that we think there needs to be more of, is which when you tell stories, we all understand a little more. There's a little bridge built. And I think that's the thing I love about Luca as a character, is he really embodies curiosity and learning and not letting those differences stand in the way. And I think that the stories are richer, they're better when there's more captured in them. There's so much for everybody to learn about places, people, all these different stories. There's really no end of where all these wonderful stories can come from. And I think our audiences are hungry for those stories. I think we're hungry for those stories as filmmakers too, because we're our own audiences. We all love films, that's why we make them. And so I think the power that animation has to ignite that curiosity, to build bridges, to, create more tolerance and understanding is something we all care deeply about.
I'm sorry, someone going to jump back in, or?
That was probably me saying, well put, that's all.
Osnat, a question came in for you. Your film is about restoring a fractured world. Is it a parable for the real world we live in today?
Can I just answer the question before real quick as well? Because
of course.
I thought everything everybody said was so great, and I, as a member of so many of the communities we're talking about, but I also, one of the things that surprised me as we worked on this film, and even as the film came out, is that it's still something we should talk about, that we had 3 strong, interesting female leads. That's still not something, like, we're all trying to expand the inclusion and really believe in it. And even now, 50% of our audience, and hopefully soon, someday, of our filmmakers are not finding as much representation on screen. And that's I just want to bring it up because I often hear the response, hey, aren't we in a post-gender discrimination world? We're not. So I just wanted to put that back out there, because for me, one of the most important things working on the film including the Southeast Asian conversation that was mind-boggling and so illuminating for me was the fact that we got to play with these characters and explore these two girls and their friendship and how they could have been each other, and even the dragon being a female character because it was a story about harmony and about beauty, about life. So I just want to put that out there. But to answer your question,
thank you for that. Thank you for adding that.
That's my little soapbox moment, everyone. Sorry, I'm going off. But to answer your question, yes, I think we're living in an incredibly fractured world. I am from Israel. I was born there. I grew up all over the world. I got to travel a lot as well. I was making documentaries for a very long time. And honestly, we're a bit of a mess. And we have big threats that are threatening all of us, including what and most importantly, I think what we're doing to nature. And so do I think we all have to get I won't swear, we all have to get our business together and work together to take care of each other? Absolutely. And for us telling the story of Raya and those 5 lands and Raya and Namari, that was broken. She was betrayed many times. Somebody asked a question about, why we talked about individual trust when there's so many systemic issues with trust. I agree with you 100%. And we thought a lot about whether Raya should be a princess or not. Just because she's a strong female protagonist in a Disney movie doesn't mean she has to be a princess. And the more we thought about it, the more we recognized that we want her to have the pressure of leadership. Because as a leader, her making that choice in that moment, it was a personal choice, but it was also the choice that we need our leaders to make, if I'm being really honest. So yes, we're in a fractured world, and yes, we should all get ourselves together because it's a beautiful world and we need to take care of it. That was my soap.
Got it. Jonas, this question came in for you. Thanks for a marvelous experience. How did the real protagonist respond to seeing himself as an animated character?
He was, he's really happy with the film. I think he sees himself in it. Oh, I know he sees himself in it. We watched the film together for the first time when it was done, just the two of us. And we sat down, and there was a bit of silence after the credits, and he turned to me and said, "I don't know if this is a good film." He can't separate his own kind of story from the filmmaking in this film. So to him, it's not an easy watch to watch the film. But he's really happy that the story is out there. And as Charlotte said, him growing up, he didn't have a lot of stories that he felt represented him in the world. So to be able to give his story and to give that to people, to the millions of people who have similar experiences as him, is really meaningful to him. So it's not easy for him to watch the film. It's not easy for him to see it. But he's really happy that he's been able to give it and that people get a more kind of nuanced story about the refugee experience. And that people understand that, being a refugee is not who you are. It's a circumstance, and that hopefully you can build a life of your own afterwards. So yeah.
Right. This came in for Enrico and Andrea. Who came up with the great Silencio Bruno line? And did you keep saying that to each other while you were making the film?
Yes, that's our writer, Jesse Andrew, who came up with it. I think we were looking for a wonderful, how can a troublemaker help in a silly troublemaker way build the confidence of Luca? And so when he came up with this idea that Alberto would have this, obviously his own insecurities piping up in his own head, and that he named it, we just loved that idea. So we immediately also felt like we all have one, right? Like this idea of from any anxiety piping up in your head to, the monkey mind to imposter syndrome, right? It felt so meta to our everyday life. So we absolutely loved it. And it felt preposterous. So I'm very much I probably answered question. I asked him exactly what Luca asks of Alberto's, like, why Bruno? And it's like, doesn't matter, call him what you want, And so I think we got to give him the credit on that one. And it's a great idea, and it just felt so true of our, insecure and anxiety kind of minds nowadays.
Right. Mike, Phil, and Chris, how did the idea of the hilarious Furby scene come about?
It started with a lifetime of fear. And instead of going to therapy, we made this. I made this. But it took a, whatever. We sort of ended up, talking to Hasbro and that sort of thing. But the interesting thing about it was that it sort of didn't work in the movie until we sort of made it about the family's relationship. Like, as soon as the family was coming together to stop it, but they weren't strong enough to fully defeat it, and the robots had to help, it sort of became a marker in the audience's, like, in the emotional story of the movie, because it was sort of like, oh, they're almost coming together, but they're not quite there yet. And that's when it actually worked as a scene and not just sort of a fever dream.
It also works as a fever dream, though, I have to.
You got it both ways.
It was definitely a thing that Mike was very passionate about, and for a very long time, we did not have the rights to do it. And Mike wrote 7 letters again and again and again, trying to get it, because we would try other versions, with sort of knockoff things that weren't nearly as fun or funny or ridiculous. And there's an example of how Mike was very passionate. He's like, most people would stop after 3 letters and be like, I gave it the try. We can move on to something else. But Mike was like, no, letter number 6 is going to do it.
Also, he also wrote letters to like a generic grocery store soda company, right, and the family in New Zealand whose picture we used in the movie. So he wrote many letters. And one of them was to this farmer who invented the owl-like creatures that eventually became Furbies. And to Chris's point, this movie is trying to have its cake and eat it too all the time. It wants to be wild and funny and weird and look different. And that stuff only works as well as the story will let it. And so that was one of the things I have to really credit Mike and the team on. Like, they pulled it all together where the warmth of the family story made all that stuff funnier.
Well, for anybody who's had kids that had Furbies, the nightmare of that toy, you guys captured it absolutely perfectly.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, world.
Yes. This is for the Encanto team. Are there any special powers you wanted to give the characters but had to put aside?
Sure. We had a few that didn't make it into the film. All of the characters' powers are sort of stem from their personality, right? So, Camila, we thought he was sort of like a drama kid who was always kind of trying on different personalities, and so he could shapeshift, right? Like, Isabella was the golden child, and she was perfect, and so obviously flowers bloomed her footsteps. So we're like, so what's someone who's like the life of the party, right? Like, who could be, like, what would be the superpower of someone who was just like the person who is really gregarious and walks into a room and just lit it up, and we're like, party guy! Balloons everywhere, pew pew pew, and that didn't make it in.
We never talked about where the balloons came from. They just appear from behind him somehow. It got cut. We changed it. So.
Yeah.
Okay. We've got time. I want everybody. This is for all of the directors. Okay, and we've got really kind of got time to do one more question across the group. So briefly. And Byron, I'm gonna stay with you.
Okay.
What is the one thing that you would change in the film?
The one thing. Oh, we always want to get more in the movie than we have time for. Time is it's a blessing to have to kind of edit and kind of compress it all in. There's so much more we would have liked to get in the movie, especially with such a big cast, that big family. I think that's why people are asking us if there's more to come from the Madrigals, because the goal was to really serve Mirabel's story first, but I love that each of the family members is compelling enough that you want to hear those stories. It's like you said, Bruno, obviously, like he really caught people, and he's such a complex, deep character. And John Leguizamo did such an amazing job of being hilarious and then being tragically emotional and wonderful and vulnerable. So I'd say I could have used an extra 10 minutes. 10 minutes more would have been good, but Yvette said no, it's too expensive, so we had to cater. But no, it's all. But it's a little. But I would say a little more time.
Okay, Mike, what about for you?
That's a great question. I really feel really lucky in that I'm like, we left it all on the field, man. There's definitely stuff that I like that got cut, but when you watch it, you're like, yeah, that makes sense. So I mean, if anything, I would just be sort of like a longer and more luxurious tribute to the team that made the movie, because they're so wonderful. And, sort of anything, all the sort of things about the movie that we're proud of, whether it's like the art style or the story or, the fact that it, makes me cry when I watch it. It's sort of all a tribute to them. So it would just be 20 more minutes of me shouting out every single artist who ever worked on the movie.
Okay. Enrico, what about for you?
I feel a bit like you, Mike, that I think I got really lucky because on the screen, I think that the pragmatism we had to show to finish it and the economy to made it better. So it's bizarre, but I don't know if I want the 5 minutes back. There's a couple of little scenes, there was a scene where Alberto taught fire golf. I'll let you imagine what that means to Luca, and it was a lot of trouble, and maybe that would have been fun to put back. But I feel so lucky that we, it's like when you just tighten things a little bit, and that was, I think it was a great exercise. So I feel quite happy, and I think even fire golf is probably better off just left here.
I want to see it.
Well, thank you for sharing. Fun. Thank you for sharing it with us. We can now picture that in the film somehow.
Yeah, that's right.
Jonas, what about for you?
Man, I don't know. I've done a lot of Q&As with the film by now, and a question that comes up a lot is why are you blonde in the film? Because I changed the color of my hair in the film. And it really, growing up in Denmark, when I was a kid, most of my friends were blonde, so I thought, okay. And back then, I really wanted to be blonde when I was like 10, 11 years old. So I made myself blonde in the film, but maybe now I should just use the real color of my hair. But no, I'm really happy with how the film ended up. So I actually don't have anything else. So the color of my hair.
Okay. And Carlos, what about for you?
I think similarly, we're all so proud of the movie, and even though it was made under strenuous circumstances, we really just feel like all the pieces came together at the right time. I'd probably just say jokes, especially having someone like Awkwafina in our cast. The amount of stuff that she improv'd, the amount of non-Disney safe things that she said, I think it's just there's in an alternate world there's a adult version of the movie that just has all of Awkwafina unfiltered that I think would be equally as hilarious. There's this one particular joke when she first turned into a human, so our dragon has shape-shifting abilities. And she first turns into a human and she's fascinated. And we had this joke that said, oh, this is wonderful, blah, blah, blah. It's going to make digestion so much faster. And, it's I'm not performing it properly, but it was a joke that we loved, and it couldn't make it into the movie. Made it into the trailer because we tried to sneak it in there, at least for something. But there's just so many great moments that just for timing and for story purposes we had to omit. So that.
Okay. That really brings us right up against up against our 2-hour mark. So unfortunately, I mean, I could go on with you guys all day. I've met and talked to so many of you, over the years, and you know me. I could listen to you every time we talk. I learn something new about filmmaking and about the art and craft of animation. But we're out of time. Byron, Charisse, Yvette, Jonas, Charlotte, Enrico, Andrea, Carlos, Osnat, Mike, Phil, and Chris, thank you so very, very much for being with us here today and for sharing. I know you've talked to a lot of people about your films. We've benefited from you agreeing to do it one more time, and you were just so insightful and sharing. And I really want to thank you, Maria Elena. Again, thank you so much for putting this all together. Everybody, don't forget the View Conference is October 16th to 21st in Turin. We'd love to see you there. And it's a great time of year. You'll be walking around, but it's not too hot, not too cold. There's the 3 upcoming preview sessions: the VFX Oscar, the best animated shorts, and then there's a Turning Red panel coming up. Go to the View Conference website. And again, thank you all very much, and to all of you out there watching us, thanks. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for everything.
Bye. Thanks.
Thank you.